Hello aspirants, welcome to Ishna IAS Academy. Hope you're all doing well. In this series of UPSC current affairs for 2025 prelims examination, today comes the second session of this series. Okay, so here we are going to come up with another 3 more important topics which are highly important for your current affairs. Okay, so for more these kind of videos, please do subscribe for Vishnu IAS Academy, as well as comment your valuable suggestions, doubts, or any of your requirements or inquiries in the comment section, and we would be very, very happy to help you. Okay, so on this note, let's get into the topics directly. Okay, so there is one more topic in the news that is related to a sacred festival which combines both the spiritual energy as well as the celestial energies. Okay, that festival is celebrated on the eve of Makara Sankranti. Okay, and that is celebrated in Sabarimalai. Okay, that festival is named as Makara Villakku festival. Okay, so this is the festival which is celebrated in the Sabarimalai temple. Okay, Sabarimalai Ayyappa Swami temple. Okay, it is a annual Hindu festival. Okay, which is celebrated once in a year. Okay, and this is very, very sacred, celebrated in Kerala. Clear? And now, what is the significance of this festival? Is that it marks the celestial event. This Makara Villakku festival, it marks the celestial event of the sun entering into the zodiac sign of Capricorn, that is Makara Rashi. Sun will be entering into a zodiac sign which is either Capricorn or Makaram. Clear? And coincides with Makara Sankranti. And this celebrative annual festival coincides with Makara Sankranti as well. This is observed in the state of Kerala and it is celebrated at where? Shabarimala Ayyappa temple. Clear? And it is celebrated only once in a year. Okay, so it is a combination of both celestial as well as spiritual energies. Okay, devoted together. Clear? And these celebrations are centered at Sabarimala temple, and this temple is nestled in the Periyar Tiger Reserve in Kerala. Where is this Sabarimala temple located? It is located in the Periyar Tiger Reserve in Kerala. Okay, remember this. And this festival typically lasts for 7 long days. Okay, beginning on Makara Sankranti. The first day of this festival aligns with the Makara Sankranti and it lasts for 7 days. Clear? Now, what are the key rituals and events that are observed during this celebration? See, here in this festival, a symbolic lamp known as Makara Villakku. Remember this. It is a very auspicious and a symbolic lamp known as Makara Villakku is lit at Ponnambalamedu. It is a hill which is found near Sabarimalai. Okay, Ponnambalamedu hill. Okay, this Jyoti or a symbolic lamp known as Makara Villakku is lit on Ponnambalamedu hill near Sabarimalai on the evening of Makara Sankranti or on the first day of the celebration. Okay, this Jyoti will be lit. And here the devotees believe that a divine star known as Makara Jyoti will be appeared in the sky, which represents the blessings of Swami Ayyappa. Okay, this is the belief of the Hindu devotees over there. And devotees undertake a strict 41-day penance or vratam before making the pilgrimage to the temple. Generally, we will be all observing people, okay, taking this vratam of Swami Ayyappa during Kartika Masam. That is in a winter season. So generally, they'll be in this vratam for a period of 41 days and everybody will be on the same uniform, carrying black colored dress, and they will be observing very strict, they will be observing as well as following highly disciplined rituals. Okay, and after observing for 41 days, after practicing this for 41 days, they'll be heading to Sabarimalai temple over there. Okay, so now what is the significance of it? So as we have discussed, this festival, it will be signifying the merging of both celestial as well as the spiritual energies and celebrating devotion, purity and self-discipline. Okay, so it will be a mark of devotion, okay, purity as well as self-discipline. So, and then this tradition will be emphasizing equality such that all devotees are supposed to practice the same ritual principles by wearing the same uniform, which is either black or blue colored generally. Okay, so wearing black or blue attire and carrying the Irumudi Kettu, which is a sacred bundle on their head. Generally, these pilgrims are supposed to carry this, okay, a sacred bundle known as Irumudi Kettu on their head to the Swami Ayyappa temple. Clear? This is the brief information about this Makaravilakku festival. Clear? And now, let's go to another topic. What is this topic? Neutral experts' decision on Indus Water Treaty. Okay? What is this? Actually, it is neutral expert. It's a committee established by World Bank of India under Indus Water Treaty that has been signed between India and Pakistan for equal and undisputable sharing of Indus river system water. Okay, clear? So now this expert's decision, there has been recently a talk on neutral experts' decision on Indus Water Treaty, because not recently, from 2017 onwards, there has been a small clash or misunderstanding, okay, or a disagreement between India and Pakistan regarding this Indus Water Treaty, because India is asking for upgradation or revival of the Indus Water Treaty that has been signed in 1960, September 19th. Okay, we'll be talking about this later. So, if you want to go through the history of this topic, actually, so there has been a misunderstanding between India as well as Pakistan regarding the revival of this Indus Water Treaty from 2017. Why? Because it is in this year India has successfully built a hydroelectric project on the left bank tributaries of Indus River. Okay, that is Chenab and Jhelum, which the Pakistan says that it is against this Indus Water Treaty, and thereby it came out for sorting out this dispute. Whereas India on its side argues that no, we hadn't. Whatever we have done under the premises as well as the articles mentioned in the Indus Water Treaty itself, but we didn't cross the boundaries, is all that what India is saying. But Pakistan is saying that no, this is totally against the agreement, provisions of the agreement. Why so? Because according to this Indus Water Treaty, according to this treaty, so let's suppose that this is the Indus River, okay, right? So all the west tributaries of this Indus water are supposed to be distributed to the Pakistan, okay, which includes Jhelum and Chenab. Whereas the eastern back tributaries of the Indus river, which consists of Byas, Ravi and Satluj river waters, are supposed to be for India exclusively. Clear? This is what is the agreement. This is what is mentioned in the agreement of this Indus Water Treaty. But now India has constructed its hydroelectric projects on the west bank tributaries, Jhelum and Chenab, which the Pakistan says that those are totally against the provisions of Indus Water Treaty. Clear? Okay, this is where the dispute has arisen between. And now, as this Indus Water Treaty has been mediated by the World Bank, okay, this Indus Water Treaty okay, has been mediated by the World Bank, and this World Bank has appointed neutral experts committee for the resolution of any disputes which have arisen between India and Pakistan. And even, yes, this neutral experts committee has solved so many disputes, some of the disputes, okay, which have arisen between India and Pakistan. Now this is the latest dispute, clear? So that is why now what the news says is that neutral experts decision on Indus Water Treaty. Now it has come up with a new decision, which now let's see this whether this decision favors India or Pakistan. Clear? So now let's see what are the key features of this Indus Water Treaty. This Indus Water Treaty has been signed in September 1960 between our Indian Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru as well as Pakistani President Ayub Khan. Okay? With the aim of, why? What is the aim behind this Indus Water Treaty is the equitable sharing of equitable sharing of the water of the total Indus river system between India and Pakistan. Okay, this has been mediated by the World Bank. Clear? So now what are the key features of it? First of all is permanent sharing of water. This treaty, Indus Water Treaty, it actually ensures a clear division of water resources, okay, allowing peaceful coexistence of water uses between the two nations. Actually, prior to that, before 1960, the situation was such that because the Indus River and its whole system arises from India, especially if we talk about the exact origin of Indus River, it originates from the southwestern Tibet. Okay, and it flows from Kashmir and finally it flows through India and finally goes through Pakistan and merges into the Arabian Sea. Okay, so which means that majority of the control over this Indus water lies within India itself. There is no doubt over that. It is with the grace of India that the Pakistan is supposed to get water out of it. Okay, so prior to 1960, yes, Pakistan used to get some water from the Indus River system, but on the payment of certain compensation for that, okay, for which the Pakistan will say that no, let's go for a treaty, let's go for a peaceful and equitable, justifiable sharing of water between both the countries is the proposal with which the Pakistan came up, okay, and finally India too agreed for that, and that has been done. That treaty has been signed in the presence of World Bank, so which finally turned up to be the Indus Water Treaty in 1960. Okay, from 1960 onwards, Pakistan, without paying anything to the India, it is getting its due share of water from the Indus River system. Clear? Okay. So now, run of the river projects. Okay, run of the river projects are nothing but the projects which will derive energy from the flowing or the running water of the river. So the best example for this is hydroelectric projects. Okay, so India is allowed to build. So here this is also one of the provisions. According to these provisions, India is allowed to build hydroelectric power projects on the western rivers. Okay, so which India followed and built 2 of its hydroelectric power projects on the western rivers or the western tributaries of Indus River. Okay, for which the Pakistan is objecting now. Clear? Provided they do not obstruct, yes, the condition should be such that they do not obstruct the natural river flow into the Pakistan. These projects should not stop the natural water flow into the Pakistan. Okay, without objecting that, yes, India is allowed to build its hydroelectric projects on the West Bank rivers, West Bank tributaries of Indus River as well. Clear? And now, what is the role of World Bank over here? As a mediator, as I told you, World Bank is a mediator. It facilitates the appointment of experts or arbitral bodies in case of any disputes for their resolution. Okay, so generally there will be a permanent commission. Okay, Indus permanent commission will be there. Okay, the members of this permanent commission are responsible for settling any of the disputes. Okay, in case if disputes are not settled over here, then this dispute will be carried forward to the experts committee. In case if that dispute doesn't get settled even in that experts committee also, then a arbitrary court will be arranged. Okay, and this dispute will be taken to that arbitrary court for the resolution of this dispute. Okay, generally this is the hierarchy of this dispute resolution process. Okay, and India will ask the World Bank and the Pakistan also. First of all, Pakistan. So India will be asking Pakistan to first resolve this matter in the Permanent Commission itself, and then it will be asking the Pakistan to go according to the hierarchical level of this dispute redressal mechanism. But whereas Pakistan, without paying any heed to the India, it will directly go to the arbitrary bodies or the arbitrary court for justification of this. Okay, so that is where the dispute arises over here in particular. And now, yes, there is a feasibility of the modification of the provisions of this Indus Water Treaty according to Article 12 and Clause 3. Remember this, according to Article 12 and Clause 3, yes, there is a feasibility of modifying the provisions that are mentioned in the Indus Water Treaty. Clear? But through mutual consent. Both the countries should cooperate with each other for these modifications or the amendments of these provisions. Okay. Now, what are the disputes around this Indus Water Treaty is? First of all, run-of-the-river projects. India's construction of run-of-the-river hydroelectric projects such as Kishan Ganga. India has constructed 2 hydroelectric power projects, okay, on the west bank rivers of Indus River system. One is Kishan Ganga hydroelectric power project has been built on the tributary Jhelum River, and Ratley is another hydroelectric project that has been built on Chenab River. Okay, and Pakistan has objected to these 2 power projects. Clear? And now, why? Because Pakistan claims that these projects could disrupt the downstream flow of the water from these rivers. Okay, while India argues that they comply with the provisions of the Indus Water Treaty. This is the main dispute or the main misunderstanding. It's not misunderstanding. Main disagreement. Okay, this is the main disagreement. And now, let's see what the dispute redressal mechanism should be for here. Okay, Pakistan, it has sought arbitration at the Permanent Court of Arbitration. But India contested its jurisdiction and emphasized using the neutral expert process as outlined in the treaty. Pakistan, it wants this dispute to be resolved through Permanent Court of Arbitration, whereas India wants this problem to be solved through neutral expert as mentioned in the treaty. India wants to go according to the treaty for this problem solution, whereas Pakistan, it wants the solution directly from the Permanent Court of Arbitration. Okay, this is the second area of dispute. Clear? This is the third. This is the second and this is the first one. Clear? And now, another deficit between both the countries is, both India and Pakistan, is obviously trust. Isn't that so? So, the lack of trust and also strained relations between India and Pakistan, okay, undermines the effective cooperation under this Indus Water Treaty. Okay, all these 3 factors doesn't contribute for the effective cooperation of Indus Water Treaty between the 2 countries. What are those? Lack of trust, lack of cooperation, and lack of coordination between the 2 nations. Clear? And now, this atmosphere of distrust restricts constructive dialogue and hinders timely resolution of disputes affecting the treaty's overall effectiveness, because this dispute has been lagging behind since 2017. Due to lack of effective dialogue between both the nations, India has been constantly reminding Pakistan to come forward for this redressal addressing, but Pakistan, it kept on postponing by asking directly the Permanent Court of Arbitration to take up this problem. Okay, take up this case. This is where the crossroads, this is where the struck up has been started over here. Clear? And now, one more important factor is that climate change impacts. Due to this climate change, what happens? First of all, precipitation patterns will be changing, thereby affecting the water content in the river, and also sometimes the altered runoff, the river path may be altered, okay, due to this climatic change, okay, and which will be challenging the treaty's assumption of fixed water availability to both the nations, which were never unaware of during 1960s. Okay, during 1960s, leaders were unaware of the climate change impacts on this Indus Water Treaty, and thereby, now as we are facing that, okay, there will be disturbances in the distribution of water between India and Pakistan due to alteration in runoff, flow of the river, as well as water content in the river also. Clear? Now, what is the way forward for this? First is that revise Indus Water Treaty framework, as India is asking the Pakistan to revise the Indus Water Treaty agreement. This is one of the most effective way forward for bringing a solution to this problem. Clear? Advocate for treaty modifications to address evolving needs like climate change impacts, rising industrial as well as agricultural needs, okay, and demographic shifts, ensuring equitable and sustainable water sharing between two nations. Okay, here by changing the provisions of the Indus Water Treaty, okay, based on the current situations, based on the current demands, based on the current climatic changing patterns, we can ensure sustainable as well as equitable distribution of water between the two nations. Okay. And second one is that strengthen dispute resolution mechanisms. How? Promote adherence to treaty sanctioned processes like the neutral export mechanism, fostering trust, cooperation and timely resolution of technical disagreements while upholding India's hydroelectric and clean energy rights. So here it says that yes, for solving these type of problems, technical problems especially, so we are supposed to depend on neutral export mechanism as mentioned in the treaty, okay, and also enhance and promote cooperation, coordination between the two nations, especially in dialogues, okay, between the two nations, and thereby upholding India's hydroelectric projects that are built in these two rivers, recognizing the rights of clean energy of India. Finally, India's clean energy rights are supposed to be recognized because there is nothing wrong in scrutinizing the projects, hydroelectric projects that have been constructed by India over those two rivers, because India says that yes, we have built these two projects such that there won't be any objection to the flow of water into the Pakistan. Okay, so peaceful resolution for this problem is going through only this neutral export mechanism. Clear? Yes, done. Now, health benefits. Another topic, health benefits of including human papilloma virus vaccine in the national immunization program. Why this has been come up in the news? Because the National Technical Advisory Group on Immunization, there is a Technical Advisory Group on Immunization which has proposed the Indian government to include human papilloma virus vaccination in National Immunization Program or Universal Immunization Program of India. Why? Because there is a virus called as human papilloma virus. Remember this. And this virus is responsible for causing cervical cancer in women. Okay. This virus affects both men and women, but in women it will be causing cervical cancer. And this cervical cancer is the second largest cancer that is responsible for the deaths of the women in India. Clear? Okay, so that is why India has taken it very seriously. And in men also it will be causing cancers like anal cancer, okay, throat cancer, lung cancer, and esophageal cancer, etc. will be caused in men also. But in women, it will be causing cervical cancer, and which is responsible for their death also. Okay, and yes, one more important fact is that there are full mechanisms, treatment mechanisms, recognition mechanisms, and also prevention mechanisms for this cervical cancer, but the problem lies in its detection. By the time this cancer has been identified or detected in the women, it will be already in its advanced stages. Okay, by which time the body doesn't respond to the treatments, thereby leading to the death of the patient. Okay, that is the reason why government is taking this HPV vaccine very, very seriously. Okay, so now, as we have seen already, the National Technical Advisory Group on Immunization, it has proposed the invention of this HPV vaccine into the Universal Immunization Program. So this Universal Immunization Program has been started in 1985. It's not started, it has been expanded, because generally the immunization program itself has started in 1978 itself in India. And this is one of the largest health sectors, immunization or health sectors in the world. Okay, so it has been started in 1978, and Universal Immunization Program has been this has been renamed as Universal Immunization Program in 1985. Okay, under this Universal Immunization Program, 12 vaccines are covered. How many vaccines? 12 vaccines are covered under this Universal Immunization Program of India. Clear? And mostly this immunization program is concentrated on mothers, okay, infants and children, for the welfare of immunization of mothers, okay, infants as well as children also. Okay, and you know, in this program, that is why this Technical Advisory Group on Immunization has advised to include HPV vaccination also into this Universal Immunization Program for women as well as men also, men and young boys especially. Okay, because this vaccination, HPV vaccination, okay, should be introduced into a person's body or a adolescent girl's body who is at the age between 9 to 14 years. Okay, an adolescent girl aging between 9 to 14 years is supposed to be given this vaccination, and that too before the encounter of the original infection with this human papilloma virus, because vaccination means itself the inactive form of the virus which will be injected into the body before the infection of the original virus. Thereby our body, it will be ready with the antibodies to fight against the virus in case any real encounter happens between the virus and the body. Okay, generally that is said to be a vaccine. So that is why this vaccination should be injected into the body before the body is infected, not after the body is infected. Okay, clear now? Yes. In February 1st, 2024, in the interim budget, our Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharam has said that the government is planning to introduce HPV vaccine into the National Immunization Program. Okay, so on this note, she said that yes, all the primary health centers as well as all the schools will be visited by the health department officers for injecting this HPV vaccine to them. Okay, this is a very commendable step introduced by the government of India. So now if we see the health benefits of including this HPV vaccination into the National Immunization Program. Why particularly we are supposed to introduce this HPV vaccination is because to prevent cervical cancer. As we know that HPV is responsible for cervical cancer in majority of the cases, and this is the second largest cancer affecting women next to breast cancer. First is breast cancer and second is cervical cancer, which are mostly causing deaths to the women in our country. Clear? So the HPV vaccine can prevent over 90% of cervical cancers caused by HPV, significantly reducing incidence as well as mortality rates associated with this disease. So this vaccination will be preventing nearly 90% of cervical cancers, which is not at all a smaller issue, and that's so that is why this vaccination stood at that significant position. Clear? And now, broader cancer protection. This HPV vaccination not only gives protection against cervical cancer, but it also prevents certain other cancers also that are associated with human papilloma virus, like vaginal cancer, vulva cancer, anus, okay, oropharynx means throat related cancer, thereby promoting overall public health and welfare of the country. Clear? So HPV doesn't only causes cervical cancer, but it also causes vaginal cancer, vulva cancer, anal cancer, oropharynx cancer also. So this vaccine will prevent all these other cancers too. Clear? And now, cost effectiveness. Next, early vaccination can lead to long-term savings in healthcare costs by reducing the need for cancer treatments as well as associated healthcare services. Isn't that so? If a person is vaccinated during her early days itself, so she can live her life with cost effectiveness. That means, so there won't be any cost. They can't afford, see, all the lower income and the middle class income, they can't afford to the cancer treatments. Isn't that so? Because it is very costly. So by taking this vaccination, people can lead a cost-effective life by preventing all these cancers, thereby leading a healthy life throughout their lives. Okay, contributing to the society as well as to the country also. And now, equity and accessibility. How? Making the HPV vaccine part of the national immunization program would enhance accessibility of the common citizens also. Okay, all the democratic sections of India can get affordability as well as accessibility to this HPV vaccine if it is brought under the umbrella of National Immunization Program. Okay, thereby especially low and middle income classes will be getting accessibility to this vaccine, where cervical cancer rates are disproportionately high in our country. Okay, and yes, if we observe our country, the cervical cancer cases are highest in Uttar Pradesh, okay, Maharashtra and Tamil Nadu. These are the three states. Uttar Pradesh, Maharashtra and Tamil Nadu are the three states in India having the highest number of cervical cancer patients. Clear? So that is the reason why we are putting so much of efforts, okay, in making this vaccination affordable and accessible to each and every demographic sectors of our nation. Okay. And now, let's see what are the barriers to this HPV vaccination. What is that? First of all, high vaccine costs. Okay, there are two types of vaccinations for this human papilloma virus. What are they? First one is Gardasil. This is a foreign vaccine. Whereas Cervarix. Okay, Cervarix and Gardasil. These two are the foreign vaccines. These are highly costly for the layman to get affordability to. Clear? So that is why their accessibility to many of the Indian families is a dream for them. First, this is the first barrier. And second one is, we are having a indigenous or Indian developed vaccine for HPV known as Cervarix. Okay, it is more affordable when compared to this foreign access vaccines. Okay, it generally it will be costing around, the Cervarix is costing around 3,900. Yes, Cervarix vaccine per dose cost is 3,900, but still it is not so much affordable to all the sections of the people. Isn't that so? So this is also one of the barriers to HPV vaccine. The cost of these vaccines is one of the barriers for all sections of the people to afford to. Okay, and now low awareness levels. Second barrier is low awareness. Again, second obstruction. Even though the people have crossed the first obstacle, second obstacle is low awareness levels. Why? Because a significant lack of awareness about HPV as well as its link to the cervical cancer results in poor understanding of the threat that will be posed by this HPV, and thereby, people, they don't come out so enthusiastically and energetically for this vaccine. Okay, so that's why this is also one of the obstacle for this. And next is cultural and social stigma. How come? Cultural taboos around sexual health and reproductive issues. Cultural taboos around sexual health and reproductive issues. They'll be discouraging the parents, especially of girls, the parents of the girls, due to misconceptions about the vaccine's necessity, for the fears of promoting promiscuity. Because they feel that they feel quite insecure. The girl's parents generally, they'll be feeling quite insecure, okay, to take their girl to the vaccination center and get vaccinated for this human papilloma virus, because it is associated with the cervix, okay, and they are afraid of all the comments or the criticisms being faced by their neighborhood because of the taboos associated with sexual health as well as reproductive issues also. They'll be questioning like, why are you taking your girl to get vaccinated for human papilloma virus? What is the reason behind that? This is the kind of doubtful or the criticizing type of questions which they pose. So the parents feared of or scared of these kind of doubts, okay, due to lack of awareness and about the sexual health and reproductive issues. They are highly reluctant and hesitant to take their girl children for this vaccination purpose. Clear? And now, gender bias in vaccination efforts. There is a gender bias between boys and girls for giving this vaccination. The focus on HPV as a women-centric infection leads to insufficient promotion of vaccination among boys and young men, perpetuating gender disparities in healthcare and reducing overall campaign effectiveness. So generally, there is a misconception that HPV virus is associated with women only, because it is mostly said that it will be causing cervical cancer. So that is why they will be thinking that this HPV infection is associated only with women or young girls. Hence, they won't be considering young boys as well as men being infected by HPV virus also, because we have seen, right, even men are not immune to this human papilloma virus infection. So generally, due to this biased opinion in the society that this virus is related or infected only to girls, generally boys and young men will be neglected from this immunization process, which should be taken care of by the government and by providing various awareness campaigns. Clear? And now let's see what are the approaches to tackle all these barriers. Is that first of all, awareness campaigns, as we have discussed. Implementing educational initiatives. What are we supposed to do? We are supposed to implement educational initiatives to inform communities about the benefits as well as the safety by taking this HPV vaccine. Okay, and we are supposed to break the myths and the cultural stigmas associated around the reproductive health issues. Okay, and next, subsidizing costs. As usual, government should come forward to subsidize the cost of these HPV vaccinations, both. And engaging healthcare providers by training healthcare professionals to communicate the importance of HPV vaccination effectively can encourage more parents to get vaccinated, particularly among the hesitant parents and young adults. As we have discussed earlier, training healthcare providers, okay, and educating parents about the benefits their children would get out of vaccinating with this HPV will encourage parents to come out of that bubble of taboos, thereby vaccinating their children to lead their lives in a healthy manner, thereby contributing to the country also. Clear? So I hope these topics will be helpful for you, and tomorrow we'll be meeting with one more session, and I'll be very happy if this session will be contributing for your examination. On this note, I wish you all the best. Bye.